Welcome to the Kickstarter Weekly, everyone. Today's video is going to look at crowdfunding campaigns that are completing their funding between December 19th and the 25th. And as always the case in my videos, I bookmark them. So if you scroll or mouse over the bar, the names of the individual sections will come up. So you can always just go to the campaign or the game that you want to hear me talk about. Now, I have the video divided into 4 sections. In the past, I've had the played game section at the front. I thought that it was a good way for me to get my thoughts and feelings on some games out there front and center, and it seems to me it's always good for someone to know what the person thinks of things, because then you can modulate my tastes to fit your own, see where we compare, and you'll know where I stand on other games in comparison to you. However, I've been playing more games at Board Game Arena lately, and a lot of these games are games that I've played a lot. And so I've already decided I'm not talking about them at length, but I think maybe it's also a good idea to just move that section to the end, and that way people can go to it if they want to, or, they'll get to it at the end of the video, but it'll keep the Kickstarter campaigns right up at the top, which is probably where they should be when I'm naming the video the Kickstarter Weekly. That is the primary purpose of these videos. I've made some changes to the played game section in recent weeks. I'm going to modify it a little bit more, but I'll talk about that in that section. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to have a brief little channel update just to let you know what's kind of happening with these series of videos and the channel in the upcoming weeks, months. I think it's probably a good time to just hit that note one last time, because this is the holidays. This is the last video I'm going to put out for the year. I've decided I'm not going to do a video next week, which would actually be really this coming week by the time you see it, because there just aren't as many Kickstarter campaigns out right now. And I do not have any campaigns funding next week that I want to profile. And so it seems silly for me to put out a video and just talk about new arrivals and played games in a series called the Kickstarter Weekly. So my next video will be 2 weeks out. Hopefully that will be out more when I want them to be, and they'll continue to be in the future, which means they'll be launching on Friday or Saturday. That will give you enough time over the weekend to look at them. If you want to have some time to sit with them and think about the games that are completing their funding in the following week, it's always my goal to get them out on Thursday and Friday, but with my own schedule, it's been getting pushed into the following week. So I think taking that week off will help me get the videos back on schedule. And there's also no crowdfunding campaigns hitting next week for me to be talking about anyway. But I will have that channel update at the end of the video, and I think it's a good place to do that. This is the video that will be out there for the next 2 weeks over the holidays, so perhaps people who are still finding the channel will find that section useful, and it will give them an idea of what's coming over the next year. All that said, thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's move forward to talk about the 3 crowdfunding campaigns that I'm profiling this week, because they all look really interesting to me in different ways. The first of these is a game called SAS Rogue Regiment. Now this one is going to complete its funding on Tuesday, December the 20th. It had a minimum required funding goal of $6,000. It's currently at $202,000, which means it's a 34 times multiplier. So it's done that many times its initial required funding goal, which is huge. That makes it the most funded game of this period in terms of sheer dollars, and also the campaign with the highest multiplier. Now, in terms of what this is, it reminds me somewhat of the Undaunted series, which is a very popular series of war games. It's fairly easy to learn, and it's fairly approachable. But that series is between 2 players. So players are playing head-to-head against each other, and it's a campaign. And there are several different games in that series. There's more to come. There was also a Reinforcements expansion put out that allows you to play it solo. But it's just a very well-liked, very highly rated war game series that works on action points and moving tiles around a grid. And moving tiles around a grid, grid movement, action points. Those are things that that game has in common with this one, SAS Rogue Regiment. SAS Rogue Regiment also has some dice rolling in it, and it's being described as a tactical sandbox. Now, while the games have some mechanics in common, the Undaunted series is really intended more as a head-to-head, 2-player competitive game, although it does now have a solo mode in it if you get the Reinforcements game or expansion. This game, however, is designed to be a solo game and a cooperative game. So in theme, in mechanics, the fact that it's a war game, all similar, but this one is designed more as a cooperative experience. And there are some campaign elements, so you can play this together rather than playing it against your friend or friends, because this game plays 1 to 4 players in about 20 to 120 minutes. The complexity on this one appears to be medium heavy, which makes it a little bit heavier than the Undaunted series, and we're going to put the risk associated with this campaign at high, because while it's a publisher that's put out a few games, it's nothing really of any note. I believe their most popular games haven't even cracked the top 10,000 of Board Game Geek. However, some of those games look pretty compelling to me, and they're designed by the designer of this game. And from what I can see, he's been doing some good work lately and is continuing to do some good work. And I think this game looks really pretty cool. I'm very excited about it. So it's a game that I wanted to pass on to you and let you know that there is another option out there to the Undaunted series, and one that is more cooperative. The designer here is Robert Butler, and his 2 most recent best-known games are Z-War 1 Damnation and Z-War 1 Exodus. Robert Butler is also one of the artists. He did art on a game called Pocket Landship. The other artist is James Churchill, and you may know his work from Feed the Kraken, Legacies, and Public Market. The publisher is Wordforge Games. They're best known for D-Day Dice 2nd Edition, D-Day Dice Pocket, and Pocket Landship. There are 3 different pledge levels on this campaign, and then there are some add-ons. So if you don't like the all-in pledge, if you don't want everything, you can get some of those items as add-ons. I believe there are also some items that are only available as add-ons. The first pledge is $55. It's called a Rogue Trooper. That's going to come with the game, a French translation pack, and stretch goals. And the game does have a lot of really good stretch goals. I've been looking at it. So there are a lot of things kind of added into the game, gives you more variability, more tiles, more cards, all this kind of stuff. I think a lot of it is Kickstarter exclusives as well. So if this is something you're interested in, I think it really does merit getting this game through Kickstarter, because there's a lot of extra stuff included, both through stretch goals and exclusives themselves. For $79, you can pledge Rogue Warrior. That's going to add in the Those Who Dare. It gives you a new, different character to play, 5 more missions, and then just a lot of extra stuff that give you more variability. So more tiles, more cards, a lot of different components across the board to kind of fill out your component pool and your options and what you can do in the game. Finally, for $122, you can pledge the Black Ops All-In Pledge. That's going to give you a Black Ops Special Edition box. It's going to include some more expansions, like the Heavy Metal expansion, which is sort of themed around various vehicles, as well as the Jaeger expansion, a custom dice tower, which is also a Kickstarter exclusive, and an ATP watch timer. Now, if you want to do some things piecemeal, you can do that through the add-ons. There are various translation packs available. The game automatically comes with the French translation pack, but if you want to buy it as a second copy, you can do that for $4. You can also, for $4, add on a German translation pack, and for $4, add on a Spanish translation pack. For $6, you can add on the Red Beret Pearl logo dice. These are some custom dice. For $18, you can add on the dice tray, and that is not included in any of the pledge levels, so if that's something you want, you need to add it on. For $55, you can add on additional copies of the base game, SAS Rogue Regiment. For $37, you can add on the They Who Dare expansion. That is the Kickstarter exclusive expansion with the new character, the 5 new missions, and just a lot of extra stuff, tiles and cards to give you more variability across the game. For $6, you can add on that ATP watch timer. For $15, you can add on the Heavy Metal expansion. For $15, you can also add on the Jaeger expansion. And then there's a third expansion for $15 called Hot Dogs. That's not listed as being included in the pledge levels in like the all-in. However, it does say in the description of the all-in that it should include all future content. So even though when that was created and they listed everything out, I don't believe Hot Dogs had been added on as like an additional thing, an additional stretch goal expansion, but I believe that it is included in the all-in pledge. It just kind of came in after the fact. Now, in terms of shipping, you're looking at $24 continental US shipping for the Rogue Warrior pledge. They have not given shipping estimates for the higher pledge level for the all-in, but just know that it will be more. It will be somewhat in keeping with the $24, but it will be more. And they do not have an estimate for it published at this time. Finally, WordForge Games plans on delivering SAS Rogue Regiment in August of 2023. Now, often when I'm profiling these games, some of them are on Kickstarter, some of them are on GameFound, maybe one or two of them are on BackerKit. This week, they are all on Kickstarter, including the next game. It's called Cube Monster. This one's going to complete its funding on Wednesday, December the 21st. It had a minimum required funding goal of $20,000. It's currently at $70,000, which is about 3.5 times that minimum required funding goal. Cube Monster is a game for 1 to 4 players, plays in about 50 to 100 minutes. Complexity on the game is medium light, and we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at high. This one is a publisher doing something for the first time. So, untested publisher. They haven't run a Kickstarter before. Now, this is a very interesting looking abstract strategy game. There are cubes in the game. You're going to have climbers who are climbing a mountain. You're going to be using the cubes and the placement of cubes, the patterns, to ascend these climbers up a mountain. So it's got pattern building in it. It's got tableau building, and it's essentially an engine builder. It's been designed by Dorsa Call with art by Maria Gandolfo and Vitaly Minin, and it's being published by a company called Crazybox. It looks almost like Crazy Box, but it's got 2 Z's, so Crazybox. There are 3 pledge levels for this one, the same as SAS Rogue Regiment, but in this case there are no add-ons, and each of the pledge levels adds something to it, not really to broaden the variety of the game, but to increase the sort of quality of the experience. For me, if I was going to back this game, I would go with the all-in, because each of those additional 2 pledge levels adds on an additional component that adds a lot of table presence to it. So for $59, you can pledge at the champion level. That's going to give you the game and any associated stretch goals. For $99, you can pledge the monstrous pledge level, and that's going to give you this piece, this big plastic, it looks like a hand, and it sits on the table, and it has all of the cubes here that you're going to be drafting onto your, your individual player boards. But it's so cool looking. It's very well designed. It's really bright in color. It pops, and it's just neat. It's the kind of thing you're paying extra for it, but it adds so much to the table presence of the game. I think it's worth it, in my opinion. Now, if you pledge at the $199 level, that's called the All-In Climber. That's going to add one more component, which is this huge big mountain. Again, it's this big kind of plastic construction, and it's got different levels that kind of go around it. So as you're playing the game and you're ascending your mountain climbers, you're going to be physically climbing up this mountain. I think without it, you're just kind of going around in a circle on the table and, kind of like a flat cardboard thing, which is fine. You can play the game that way, and certainly if you love the game, it's functional. It's going to work well like that. And this is a big increase in cost, going up $100 to get this one component. But I think, for me, if you have the money and you're looking seriously at this game, the game doesn't really feel complete without these 2 items, the hand and the mountain. So I think for me, I'd almost consider getting the game the all-in or not at all. Although I'd have to take a hard look to see if I really wanted the base game, the cheapest pledge, just pared down, because this is an expensive component, $100 for this thing, but it does kind of make the game, and it gives you this big central mountain that is just great table presence, and that's going to be the thing that people are moving their climbers around and trying to get the top of. So between that mountain and the hand, you've got an amazing looking game. It's abstract strategy, but it's got this table presence, and it kind of looks different and plays a little bit different than everything out there. But I guess the question is whether you want to put in all that money to get the full package, or if it would be worth it spending a lot less money to get a pared down version that just doesn't have the same pop, right? Depending on which of those 3 pledge levels that you pledge at, your shipping in the continental US is going to be $15 for the cheapest, $19 for the middle one with the hand, or $29 for the all-in that includes the hand and the mountain. And finally, Crazybox is planning on delivering this game in October of 2023. That brings us to the 3rd and final campaign of the week of the video. It's for a game called Aelderman. Aelderman is going to complete its funding on Thursday, December the 22nd. This one had a minimum required funding goal of $37,000. They're currently at $45,000, which is a little bit over a one-time multiplier. So they're safely and securely funded, but they haven't yet even hit a 1.5 times multiplier. Now, to me, all three of these campaigns this week look really good. They look really interesting, and they're from three publishers that aren't super well known. This one is maybe the one that I would back the most out of the three. I don't know. I do have the Undaunted series. I have a lot of the games in that series. So the question is, would I need Rogue Regiment? And I'm super intrigued by Cube Monster, but it is a pretty stiff price tag if you want to go all in and get that $200 version. However, this one, Aelderman, is a heavy euro. Rado was talking about it and comparing it to the likes of Vital Lacerda or the games by Mind Clash, with the caveat that it is it doesn't look as pretty. It looks more like a game, you know, from 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It looks like something that Queen Games might put out. Or, you know, it is about the Hanseatic League traders, and so there's some comparison there to Hansa Teutonica because they share a theme in terms of the traders, but they also have kind of an older looking art style. And Hansa Teutonica is an amazing game, especially, I mean, you really need three, you're better off with 4 or 5 players. And it's a great, really compelling game though. So it's similar in theme, perhaps similar in art style. So this game plays 2 to 4 players in about 100 to 180 minutes. The complexity on it is heavy, and again, we're going to set the risk associated with this campaign at high because the publisher just hasn't done very much. But thematically, as I already mentioned, you are playing merchants in the Hanseatic League. You're competing against other merchants. You're ambitious. You're trying to become the best, most renowned, most wealthy merchant. And there is a lot of stuff to do in this game. There are a lot of possibilities. So this is a game where there are just so many things you can do. You're going to want to pick some things based on, I don't know, whim, and then from there you can kind of fill out strategy. But there are so many options that someone could, you know, look at this and their eyes could cross, because if they try to, you know, kind of figure out every little thing that they're going to do, there's just too many decisions involved. I think that's what really gives the game its heaviness, is just all of the options. But for someone who likes having those kinds of options and wants to go into a strategy, you know, picking a couple actions first, it functions off of action points. So when you're taking your turn, you can kind of choose the things that look the most appealing to you, or the things that maybe represent your long-term goals, and then you can fill in those actions with things that work with them well, coordinate well with the first couple actions you've chosen. It's designed by Johannes Rogal, and it's got art from Ryan Lowe, who worked on the games Sea of Legends and War of Supremacy, and it's being published by a company called Rockerl Games. So it looks like rocker with an L on the end. Now, there are 2 different versions for this. There's not add-ons. For $75, you can pledge the Deluxe Edition, which includes some upgraded components, things like tiles, things like that. It's also got dual layered player boards. And I believe if there's a retail version, it will not have the dual layered player boards, and some of the components will not be as deluxe, like the tiles and things will not be as thick. Also in that Deluxe Edition, you're going to be getting solo mode cards that I do not believe will be in any future retail edition either. For $117, you can pledge for the Collector's Edition, which is going to add in metal coins, a foam insert, and a mini expansion. Now, they've just given a range for shipping. So in the continental US, that range is $15 to $25. I would just assume the highest amount, $25. Whenever anyone gives a range, I always just assume the top of the range, so I'm not taken off guard later if it ends up being at the top of the range. I don't want to be surprised or put out later, so I always just assume the most expensive option, and then if it ends up not being that, I'm happily surprised. And finally, Rockerl Games is planning on delivering Aelderman in September of 2023. So for those of you who only come to the videos to check out the Kickstarter campaigns, that's a wrap. For those of you who want to stick around a little bit longer, I will be talking about the single game that I personally backed from last week's video, and then I'll be talking about the games that were acquired into my collection in the last period. And both of those sections are important to me because that's the pool of games that I'm going to be pulling from as I start to make my teach and review videos again in the new year with new equipment, new lighting, new cameras, in a new studio space. So I'm going to be putting out teach and review videos again, but they're going to be produced on a higher level. And the games I think that will be at the top of that queue are the games that I am personally backing and the games that are new to my collection. And I want to know specifically from you all which of those games you are most interested in. So that is kind of the purpose of me putting those sections in the video so I can get feedback from what games people want to see. So I'll go through those two sections fairly quickly, and then at the end of the video, I'll be talking about the games that I've played in this period. So the game that I backed personally from last week's video, there were a few of them, is Pest. And that is a Euro game from Arcona Games. They've done a series of games in the Small Blank Empires series. So Small Star Empires, Small Samurai Empires, but all those games were by the same designer and artist. This game, Pest, is by a different designer and a couple artists, but it's the same publisher. And it's a Euro game. It takes place during the plague. You know, players are basically walking around with those big, you know, the bird masks, or the characters are, and they're trying to heal people during the plague. And it just looked like a worker placement game that was doing something a little bit differently than I'd seen before, and the theme of it being set during the plague I found very fascinating. So I decided to go ahead and pull the trigger and personally back that one. Now, as for the 11 games that I've acquired into my collection, I mentioned in the previous video, I had a bunch of games throughout the year that I'd ordered from various online retailers like Card House, Cool Stuff Inc. Some of those orders had included pre-orders. And when you pre-order something, it waits until the pre-order comes in and then everything ships together. Well, some of those pre-orders were delayed. In fact, one of them, I pre-ordered Bonfire, Trees and Creatures, because I love Bonfire. That expansion in the United States has been delayed for over a year. So the other games that were in that cart still have yet to ship, but it's nothing that I'm too worried about. I think it's a couple other expansions, like maybe Tekenu Time of Seth, I think was in there. Maybe one or two other things. But I did have some other orders that got caught up waiting for some other pre-orders that weren't as delayed but were delayed. And a lot of those are starting to come in now. So I'm having a lot of games coming in, and a lot of these games are games that I've heard lots of good things about. I think they're on my short list as, you know, best games for 2022 or serious contenders, but they're games that I need to get played. And based on what I've heard about them, they also seem like they'd be great games for me to be doing teach and reviews on, things people may want to hear more about to make their own purchasing decision, or games if they're already acquiring them, maybe you want a teach for that. So keep that in mind as I'm going through these games and let me know. The first of these is called 3000 Scoundrels. It's designed by Corey Konieczka, who's done a lot of big games like Twilight Imperium, Battlestar Galactica, the board game, which recently got kind of reskinned into a Cthulhu theme called Unfathomable. He's done Star Wars Imperial Assault, which is a huge kind of dungeon crawler set in the Star Wars world. He's done Star Wars Rebellion, Eldritch Horror, but most recently, within the last year, he's put out some smaller games. He had one called Voices in the Head, where players are doing card play, I believe, to try to determine the fate of this person on trial. And he did a game called The Initiative, which was this sort of campaign deduction game. Well, he's back with this game, 3000 Scoundrels. It's set in the American West. It's got deduction in it. It's got bluffing. There's some tableau building. And I'm just kind of fascinated by the trajectory of his career recently. And I do own The Initiative. I'm looking forward to playing that very soon with my wife, Kristen, and going through the campaign of that. So that is on our short list of games that will hopefully be getting played very, very soon. I was also very intrigued by Voices in My Head, although I haven't picked that one up yet. But I did go ahead and grab 3000 Scoundrels. It's part of my whole let's see what Corey Konitska is doing these days and let's explore this trajectory that he's gone off on these lighter games. Also, Aeon Trespass Odyssey arrived, or I should say the first 3 cycles of a 5-cycle game arrived. This thing is monstrous. It's got a gigantic box. It's essentially a dungeon crawler set in the world of like the Argonauts in Greece. It's got huge miniatures that are like the size of my hand. It was being put out by a newer publisher. I think they're called Into the Unknown. They were kind of an unknown. They've since put out another big ambitious game through Kickstarter the last year called Kingdoms Forlorn. I backed that as well. These games just very, very intriguing to me and so ambitious, and I've got in and I've started to punch Aeon Trespass, and everything that I'm seeing, it seems like it's going to deliver on its promise. And so this is a game that I definitely want to feature once I launch my Twitch channel, streaming it in 2023. I think it's going to be an amazing game that, maybe not everybody has. I don't know if it's going to be available at retail at all, but I'm assuming since it's a newer publisher and it was very expensive and it was kind of risky in some ways, that it's not something a lot of people picked up, but it's something that they may be very interested in at least taking a look at. Seeing if, Into the Unknown is a publisher they want to be aware of in the future. They could become like the next Awakened Realms. It's certainly seeming like that. So it's a game I think that will be very helpful to stream for people to be able to check it out, but also follow along in a narrative storytelling experience that they may not otherwise have access to. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to stream games like that. I'm really looking forward to that. So this is one of the games that's on the top of my list in terms of big campaign games that I'd like to stream and share with everyone. I think some other games include Madara, Oathsworn, and Chronicles of Druganor. Those 4 games are maybe the top of my list. But those are some big campaign games that I'm looking forward to streaming on Twitch in 2023, as well as some solo stuff and some Euro games. I'm a big Euro game player, love Mind Clash, love Vital Lacerda, so I'd like to also be featuring some Euros, mixing in with the big campaigny stuff. I also got in Autobahn, which was a Kickstarter game. It was put out by Alley Cat Games, and it's from the designer of Kalamala, Ragusa, and Merv, Heart of the Silk Road. I like Merv a lot. I like Ragusa a lot, and I have not played Kalamala, but I've only heard good things about it. So when this one was on Kickstarter, I don't think the price tag was that high for it, and it's a designer that I'm very aware of, and I seem to like a lot of his games, so this one was an easy back for me. It shipped kind of late because Alley Cat Games also did a game called Tinner's Trail. They put out some replacement tiles at one point, and people who wanted it were allowed to get those replacement tiles through Autobahn to kind of combine it with that order. But there was a problem with the tiles. And so the delivery of my Autobahn Kickstarter was delayed by several months. I have friends who got this and have been playing it since September, October certainly, and now we're in December and I've just gotten my copy in. So this is a game that I look forward to checking out. Really solid designer that I like a lot, and Alley Cat Games looks to have done a very cool job publishing a very colorful version of the game. So excited to check out that game. I also got in Cantaloop Book 2, A Hack of a Plan. This is a very interesting, I don't know if I call it a board game so much, although I mean it is on board game sites, it's being sold and billed as such, but it reminds me a lot of those adventure games in the 80s and 90s. Things like Leisure Suit Larry or the King's Quest series. But those games where you're walking around in an environment, you're interacting with it. Lucasfilm Games put out a bunch of these later on too in the 90s. Things like, Maniac Mansion, and then as it evolved more and more, Day of the Tentacle and Full Throttle. And I always love these kinds of computer games, video games, where you are trying to solve puzzles and you've got a big inventory and you're combining items in the inventory and you're trying to solve some maybe dialogue puzzles as well. But I really, really like those kinds of computer games, video games. So this is essentially a big binder that makes that kind of game into a board game. It uses a card system, so you get different cards when you do different things, and the cards are your inventory, and then you're able to use those cards as you go through different pages in this binder. And solve and explore puzzles with these cards. There's also kind of a red, piece of translucent red thing that you can use for hints if you want to see some hints but not others, and sometimes it's used on cards as well, so you're only seeing some of what's on the cards with hidden text. Now, I got the first game and I played it with Kristen, and we really, really enjoyed it. The only problem, I think, is the price tag on this. So to do a sort of a board game version of this, you're looking at, I think the retail starts around $30 for this game. And it's essentially kind of like if you were to go on like Xbox or PlayStation and get one of these games, like Telltale did some of these games like Sam and Max. Later on, they started doing Walking Dead, Wolf Among Us, but those later games became much more about dialogue choices, and they lost the puzzle element to them. In any event, though, those games were published in chapters. And so, you get 5 different chapters that were put out over time as they kind of worked on the game. So they'd release them in sections. And long story short, Cantaloop, one of the binders, feels like one chapter of one of those games. However, those games can usually be acquired a chapter for maybe $5. Usually you can get the whole game once it's done for $20 or $30. In this case, I think it's designed to be 3 chapters overall, 3 different binders, and each binder is selling for $30. So it's going to be almost $100, $90 to get all 3 binders. And it's just a lot of money for the gameplay, but it is cool, and I really like the design. I think they've done a great job kind of adapting that sort of game for the table, for tabletop. It's just when you're dealing with physical production on that level, so every time they're making a game, they have to physically produce all this stuff, the materials, the components, it can't be sold quite as cheaply. So it's a game that I really enjoy. I just wish that it was half the price or even less. But I am excited to play more Cantaloop, and I'll let you know what I think about it. I did very much enjoy the first one. My main caveat with it was the price tag and the fact that once you finished it, you just wanted to start the next one, which wasn't out yet. And it was going to be a while because of physical production. And also with that price tag, there were questions in my mind whether the first game would do well enough that the successive expansions or installments would be produced. But the second one is out now. The third one I think is coming soon. I guess I'll be getting them. I'll be playing them. I'll be holding my breath a little bit at the expense, and then I'll be selling them and hopefully passing them on to someone else at a discounted price. And then maybe between the two of us or more, if they keep selling it and it keeps getting passed around, hopefully the price tag can be merited over time. But it is very, very cool and very, very well done. And the puzzles are very smart and clever. It's designed very, very well. It's got great art to it. It's just a little expensive, I think, for what you're getting. Clinic Extension 5 also came in. I backed everything else through Kickstarters, but I hadn't, for some reason, picked up Extension 5. I think at the time I thought it was extraneous. And then as I got everything in and I played the game, I decided, no, I do really want Extension 5 as well. So I ordered that through retail. It came through one of these shipments that's just now arriving, which is fine. I didn't need Clinic Extension 5 for the last year because there is so much to Clinic. It's a great game, very sandboxy, tile placement, worker placement. You're basically running a hospital, and the rules for how you run that hospital are different depending on which modules from which expansions or extensions they call them you put in. There's also a booklet that has many campaigns that combines all of these extensions and the modules in different ways. There's just a lot of game in that package, and this new deluxe version that was illustrated by Ian O'Toole looks aces, and so I just wanted to be a completist and get the the 5th extension. So I talked last week about getting the last 2 kind of after the fact modules, Biohazard and COVID-19, and this is me just completing everything with the final extension. I also got in Lockup Breakout, which is an expansion for the game Lockup, a role-player tale. I acquired that one because I really like Stan Kordonsky. I've been backing some of his games recently. I've gotten in Endless Winter Paleo-Americans and Resurgence, and I'm trying to just go back and get some other Stan Kordonsky stuff that I missed when it came around the first time. So this is an expansion for Lockup. It is set in Coolback Prison. That was the name of the prison I couldn't remember in the previous video, but that is in the Thunderworks Games role-player universe. Coolback Prison is fairly well known. So in this game, it's a worker placement game. You're trying to escape from the prison, and what I've just gotten in is the expansion to Lockup. It's called Breakout. So looking forward to getting both the base game and the expansion played for the first time soon. I also got in Messina 1347. This is actually a 2021 game, but it took a while for the American version to be published and released. And then I believe it was sitting in a cart for a while waiting for other things to come in. So it's Vladimir Suchy, the designer of, well, one thing is Underwater Cities. I really like him as a designer. I think he makes amazing games. I'm looking to get more of his games into my collection. This was one of them. It's almost a 2022 game, but technically a 2021 game. And then last on this list, I have another Suchy game that also just arrived. So we're going to be having some fun Suchy times around here soon. I also got in Skymines, which is basically a retheming of Alexander Pfister's Mombasa. Now, I love Mombasa. In fact, I think I would rather have Mombasa over Skymines. I also have Blackout, Hong Kong, which was also kind of a retheming of Mombasa, but in my opinion, not nearly as good as Mombasa. This one is just more of a direct retheme, but there are some things that they changed that I don't like as much in terms of the graphic design and some of the mechanics and the way some of the exterior boards work. The problem with Mombasa is that it has a very, very vague, abstract colonial element to it. It's so vague that you may not even realize it's there when you play it, depending on how much you're paying attention to it at the time. But it's still a colonial element, and that's a problem in games. Not everyone wants to play that. Not everyone wants to be dealing with that in a game. So I understand there's a problem there with that, and as a result, they're no longer publishing Mombasa, and it's really hard to even find it secondhand, especially if you want to get a new copy secondhand. Very difficult at this point. So I went ahead and I just bought this new version of it called Skymines. It basically sets it in space, and it's like 90 to 95% Mombasa. Obviously, it's great that the colonial element isn't there anymore, but some of the things that they did with different resources and how close they look to each other and some of the changes that they made in various boards and just the graphic design and something, it's just not... I still want Mombasa, but I think I'm just going to have to settle for Skymines because I don't think I'm going to be able to find a copy of Mombasa that I want anytime soon. And then even if I were, it's still got the semi-problematic colonial element into it, which granted is not as strong or overbearing as in some games, but it is there. I also got in Terracotta Army, and this is one from Board and Dice that went to retail. It's from Adam Kwapinski, who designed the Nemesis games. Also a game called Origins First Builders, which I really like a lot. And then I just got in a game of his called Frostpunk, which is this huge game with all these miniatures. You can play it solo. It's kind of got like a campaign to it. You can play it cooperatively. It's based on the video game, but I'm so excited to dig into Frostpunk. And Terracotta Army is basically like a Euro game that Adam designed. I really liked his other Euro game, recent Euro game, Origins First Builders. I've also got Lords of Ragnarok coming soon from Adam, and the Lagrange Deluxe remake. I just like Adam's design work. So this one, also coming from Board and Dice, who's one of my favorite retail publishers. This was just a no-brainer for me. I also picked up another game from Board and Dice that I believe was sitting in a cart for a while, waiting on some pre-orders. That one's called Tiletum. It's co-designed by Daniel Tascini, who designs a lot of really great Euro games for Board and Dice, but has made some problematic statements as a human being. There's some questionable things going on there. I think the thing that really made me get this game anyway, even though he's involved, is the fact that it's co-designed by Simone Luciani, who has designed a lot of games that I really love, including Grand Austria Hotel, Newton, Lorenzo El Magnifico, Barrage. So it was just kind of his involvement that pushed me over and had me acquire Tiletum, even though I have very mixed feelings about Daniel Tascini. I think he's kind of problematic, and I'm trying, for the most part, not to put money in his pocket and get his games, but this is a co-design with someone else, so it becomes a more complex situation. at least for me. And the final game on this list is Woodcraft. It is a very cute looking game. It's a very heavy Euro though. It is a heavy Euro. So even though it looks cute, there's a lot going on. It is another design from Vladimir Suchy, the same designer who did Messina 1347. So I'm really looking forward to this one as well. And Suchy games are just always games that I want to play and are pretty much guaranteed to stay in my collection from the Suchy games I've played so far. So that is my list of 11 acquisitions, things that I've acquired into my collection this period. Let me know if any of these are specifically interesting to you, and if these are games that you want teach and review videos made for as I head into 2023 and I start to produce a lot of teach and review videos. The final category of the video, which used to be at the front, but now I'm switching it to the back, is the played games section. Part of the reason that I'm doing that is because I'm playing more and more games on Board Game Arena. I'm going to talk a little bit about Board Game Arena at the top here because I think Board Game Arena is a great resource for anyone. I have no affiliation with them. I'm not being paid to say this. I just think for board gamers, especially if you're looking for ways that you can play, by yourself. I know the pandemic is now sort of, hopefully, mostly behind us. People have their shots. They can go out and play and be in public more and more. And if you're masked, even better. But I think people are now more and more looking for ways to play things at home and maybe remotely. And the great thing about Board Game Arena is you can play with friends who live across the country. And it's got a turn-based system. So you can play in real time. And if you're sitting down and you want to play a game in real time, that's great. They also have turn-based games, so you can just play the turn-based game, and when you have a little spare time in the day, come back in, check and see if it's your turn, and play. This is something I think, historically we've seen people doing this with like chessboards, even hundreds of years ago, where they'd have the same chessboard set up, and they'd make a move, and then they'd like mail or send their move to someone who's playing on a different board somewhere far away. Well, now we can do this through the magic of the internet, and turn-based games allows us to do that. And when you go to Board Game Arena, you can play games for free. However, you can't, for a large section of games, you cannot start a game for free. So some games, yes, other games, no. Generally, the newer games and maybe the more popular games are kind of behind a paywall. But it's not that much. The paywall's not that much. So I would recommend anyone, who enjoys board gaming, go and check it out. And if you think it's worth your while to do a membership, you're helping to, keep that resource going, and it's not that much money. Now, in terms of the way Board Game Arena works, when you start playing a game for the first time, you're just going to be playing against probably other people who are new to the game. Anyone can play, but people who are more skilled at the game and have played it a lot, they may be doing other things with the game. They may be doing tournaments or arena mode. And this is part of the way that the game, I think, structures its division of players based on how well that they know a game, which I think works really well. So certainly if it's a heavier game, you're going to want to read a rule book before you play. The interface for most games is fairly easy to use. A lot of times it doesn't let you do things you can't do. And there are rule books within the interface if you want to do that. And some of it guides you. So certainly for lighter games, I think a lot of the time you can kind of pick it up as you're playing. Although if you do that, you may want to be doing it with a friend because you can get in trouble depending on the game, depending on your time frame. If you take too long to play, like if you're doing a real-time game and you take too long to play, you can end up with some penalties because they're trying to make sure that people are playing with other reliable people. So if people start games and don't finish them or walk away or aren't playing, they will be penalized in a way that it becomes notable to other players. So other players know, okay, this person's kind of unreliable. You want to stay away from them. So I would recommend when you're first playing a game to maybe do it with a friend or at least read a rule book on your own. But then I think you should have an easy time learning it. And certainly if it's an easier game. So you'll play a little bit and eventually you'll win some points as you win the game a few times. And once you get over 100 points, you are then able to go and register for tournaments. And you are able to do arena mode. Now, arena mode is something where you're going to be playing against people that are of your level. There are a lot of pull-down choices in the menu for you to choose in terms of, like, I want to play something, if it's a turn-based game, with a high frequency or a low frequency. So maybe you want to be playing with people who play 24 moves in one day, or maybe you want to be playing with people who play one move in a day. So you can prioritize those. And then you'll be put with people who are of a similar skill level and want to play at a similar rate as you. So I think that is all really, really genius and invaluable. And the only kind of ramp up to that is just getting to 100 points in which you're first learning the game and probably playing with other people who are learning the game. Also, in addition to arena mode, you can sign up for tournaments. You'll sign up ahead of time, and then when a tournament comes, you will just be playing anyone from one game to a bunch of games, depending on the tournament and the way the tournament is structured. And to me, this is a great way to play games that you really love, but you maybe don't want to play them every day, so you can just do a tournament, and it's a fun way to kind of gauge yourself and see how well you can do. And because they've got both real-time modes and the turn-based modes, there's just a lot of ways that the application can function based on what a player wants to get out of it. And then also, because they have this 100-point system, you have to clear that to get to the arena mode and the tournament modes. It does a very good job of, I know gatekeeping is generally a bad word in this hobby, but it does a good job of gatekeeping people based on knowledge of a certain game and skill level of a certain game, so that you're always going to be playing against people that are similar to you if you so choose. And so you won't get, the pants beaten off of you by someone who's an expert at the game if you say you don't want to play with experts. But also, if you are an expert, or maybe a little bit less than an expert, you can try to find people that are at your level, and you won't have to play with, beginners. So all in all, I think it's a great tool and a great way to play board games, especially if, you live alone or you're having trouble playing multiplayer games on the regular. So part of the reason that I wanted to move this section to the end of the video is I'm playing this more and more. Another thing is I don't have to sit down and just play at one time. So it doesn't take up a lot of time. I can do turn-based games and just a few times a day make a couple moves. So it doesn't feel like it's a huge time suck to me. But I am playing some of the same games. I'm going to be talking about them less the more I play them. But I do want to mention them, and I do want to update my scores, because I think it's valuable to an audience to kind of know what I think of various games and how I rate them. Because then when I talk about new games, you'll have a frame of reference, and you'll know, oh, well, Brian doesn't like this game, but that doesn't really mean anything because he doesn't like this other game, which is similar. So we know he doesn't like these kinds of games that much. So even though he's rating this low, it could still be a really good game. Or you'll know, oh, Brian really loves these games. He plays these games all the time. These are his favorite kinds of games. So if he's rating this kind of game low, there may be something to that. Maybe that's a game I don't want to rush out and pay full price for. Maybe I want to explore it a little bit more, because I know that, Brian and I have the same tastes here. And he likes generally these kinds of games, and this one's giving him a little worry. So I think it's good to have those as a metric, a barometer for audience members to kind of know where I stand with things. And while I don't plan on speaking at length about games that I'm playing a lot on Board Game Arena, I do think it's valuable to keep updating my scores and have those scores out there. So all of that said, I'm going to quickly go over 12 different games I've been playing since the last period. 11 of them are games that I've been playing on Board Game Arena, and I think these are all games that I've talked about before. So I'm really just going to give you some scores, update my scores. 2 of them I think have changed since the last time I talked about them. The 12th game is a game that I've been talking about quite at length, because it's a campaign game, a dungeon crawler that I've been playing. We played, well, I'll talk about when I get into it, but I'm not going to talk at length about that because I'm going to be doing a video review on it probably in the first quarter of 2023, and I'll be having my friend Ryan do the video with me, and we'll both talk about the game at that time. Let's just get started on these scores, though. So the first game on the list is Seven Wonders. It's a card draft game, card selection game. You're trying to create an engine and score a lot of points at the end of the game. Now, this is a game you want to play with a lot of players. The card drafting happens. It kind of like, you get 7 cards at the start. You pick a card. You pass the cards along to the left. It's a great game that can be taught simply and played with a lot of people. The one caveat there is there's a lot of iconography in it, which can be off-putting a little bit. And I find that while there are choices to be made, and it is the kind of game that I want to come back to and occasionally keep playing on Board Game Arena and maybe do tournaments in, it just doesn't really gel for me that much. It's not a game that I love. So my score for Seven Wonders, I think, is remaining consistent with the past, and I'm rating it a 6.5. Now, Seven Wonders Duel, which is the two-player version of that, I like a little bit more, but I still don't love it. I think the decisions are a little bit better, at least for me, and it's got 2 expansions. I've talked about those in the past. I won't talk about those here. It's got Agora and Pantheon. And I think I just like the base game, and then maybe once I play the base game more, I'll start to throw in Pantheon a little bit more. But I didn't love Agora. But I was rating Seven Wonders Duel at an 8.0. The more I play it, I'm just enjoying it a little bit less. I think it's a game I'm going to be coming back to even less. So I'm downgrading my score from Seven Wonders Duel to a 7.0. So I still like it a little bit more than Seven Wonders, but it's just neither one of them is really my game. Oh, and I played Seven Wonders Duel 3 times this period. I played Caper Europe 6 times, and this is a game that I've talked about quite a bit in the past. I think it's a great head-to-head card game. You're vying for some area location. You're scoring points in different ways. It's a really solid game, and the Kickstarter version was very, very well produced. I had been rating it at 8.5. I just don't think I love it quite that much. The more I play it, I mean, it's still good and it plays quickly. It's easy to teach. You can almost use it traveling. It's smaller footprint. And I still do really enjoy it, but I think I am reducing my rating from an 8.5 to an 8.0. I also played the Castles of Burgundy twice more on Board Game Arena. This is a great engine building game. I think it's great for all player levels. You're rolling dice and you're using those dice every turn to take tiles from a central area and place tiles on your board. It's kind of an engine builder. It's a tableau builder. It's tile placement. It's a wonderful game. 9.0. I continue to hold that score for the Castles of Burgundy. Okay, now the campaign game that I was talking about is Descent Legends of the Dark. And we will be doing a big review on this one probably in the next couple months. I'll be talking about it at length there. I've talked about it in the past. I don't want to repeat myself too much. I will just quickly say that this is a game that I really loved in the beginning. I wanted to love. It's a miniatures game. It's the latest iteration of Descent. The more we play it, the more we have significant problems with the design. In the latest scenario that we played the other weekend, we kind of skated our way through most of the second to last scenario, and then we go into the final room with the boss. And this is something that this game does over and over, where it puts you into these final boss fights where you have a boss with like 150 hit points, and on top of that you've got like 7 elite minions, and then on top of that you've got things happening in the room itself. So we literally walked into this room, we thought, okay, there's all these monsters down there, we've got this boss who's super powerful, who's going to be infecting us every turn. Infecting is bad. It causes you to take damage when you flip a card. When you're in these big fights, you need to constantly flip cards so you can refresh abilities. So the boss is going to be a problem enough, but then he's got all these minions, and then we come out kind of above them on this floor, and we knew this was going to happen, but there's no way to really avoid it. The floor fell out from underneath us. All the characters fell down, took some damage, and then we've got like 8 monsters, 7 which are kind of a lead and a boss on us. We died within 2 or 3 rounds. And we continue to find this game exceedingly frustrating because elements of it are cakewalky and then elements of it are basically unbeatable. And I think the only way that you'd have a shot at beating this scenario is if you went and watched videos on the scenario ahead of time, read up about all the mechanics, and kind of knew ahead of time when we go into this room, we need to stay outside the door, maybe have one person run in and do something and then run back and then pick off the enemies in a certain kind of way. Some of the enemies teleport, so some of them would teleport up with us. We could pick them off. But in order to use an effective strategy, and I think even if you knew what that strategy was, like what the best strategy was to possibly have you be able to kill the boss, I think it'd still be a 50-50 as to whether you could pull it off. But not knowing the situation walking in there and finding it out as you're playing, it's basically unbeatable. And this is a game where the scenarios take hours. And it is not fun at all to walk into a situation like this when you're putting hours and hours into something and then just insta-die because the designers, seemingly in trying to make it hard, are just throwing too many things at you. it feels like lazy design and bad design, and it is making us really strongly dislike this game. I really want to get back to Descent 2.0 once we're done with this, but the problem is Descent 2.0 is no longer being published, and you can't find expansions or anything anywhere unless you go on the secondhand market and it's really expensive. So in my mind, and we'll talk about this more in the eventual video, this series needs to be kicked into a landfill and abandoned with prejudice. And they need to reboot Descent 2.0, whether they make it 3.0 or 4.0 or however they do it. They should not be continuing Descent Legends of the Dark, the series. And it comes with an Act 1 on the box, which seems to be indicating that there's more acts to come. But there is some really egregious design flaws in the way it's designed. I think the only way that this could work for someone, because I'm always trying to look for ways a game could work for someone, is if you wanted to play this game solo or with one other player, and you didn't mind running through the campaign first, taking notes, and saying, you know, some of these scenarios are going to take 7-8 hours a piece, and we're gonna get destroyed on our first campaign, and then we'll go back and replay it with our notes, and we'll have a shot at actually maybe being able to beat it. Now, it feels to me like in general, this is a design that would have worked with like a video game that's a roguelike, something where you go in, you die, you'd learn, and you could go back and try again. There are problems with that anyway, because I know my friends I don't think would want to go and replay scenarios that take 7-8 hours where you've been just brutally slaughtered the first time around. Some of the scenarios do go that long. Certainly they like 3 hours, easily, minimum. But even if you were okay with that, there's no way to do that. You can't go and replay these scenarios. So it's got like a roguelike mindset in the way a lot of the encounters are designed, but then the game overall is not designed as a roguelike to let you take advantage of that. You literally would need to play through the whole campaign first, spending, I don't know, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours just getting brutally slaughtered through a third of these, you know, scenarios, and then coming back later with that knowledge to try to actually have a shot at completing the campaign in a way that may be pleasurable to you and have your heroes be able to succeed at it. But it's just a lot of, I don't mind failure in games so much, at least when there's a chance of success, but when it is designed in such a way that you do not have success as an option, it feels purposeless. It feels like the designers and the game are wasting your time, and it makes it infuriating. And this is a game that, you know, when I started playing it, I was like, oh, I love it. It's so much fun. I like a lot of the card play and things, and I do. But I was rating it like a 9.0, and it slowly trickled down over time. And now my rating, it's gotten lower after this last experience. I am now rating Descent Legends of the Dark at a 4.5. And if we have a horrible experience with the final scenario, which it seems like we probably will, that rating could very well go down even lower. So Descent Legends of the Dark, 4.5. Come back for both my thoughts on it and Ryan's in first quarter 2023 when we do our teach and review. I played Kingdom Builder again. This is an older game. It's got some good choices in it. I think it's not going to be a game I'm ever going to love, though. It's a game I'll probably play in tournaments from time to time. It's just a very simple game where you're just getting a card randomly every round and using that card to build some structures on a 4-tile modular board. And as you build them in certain ways, you may get some additional powers. You're also doing some kind of area control. It is a wonderful, very simple game. It's a great introduction into the hobby. I think it's a cornerstone, or can be a cornerstone of the hobby. But it's something that it does get very samey, and for me, it's not going to be something I'm going to want to play in a great volume. So I'm giving it a 6.5. I will enjoy it from time to time when I come back to it. Lost Ruins of Arnak, I've played a couple more times, and this one I am continuing with my score of 9.0. I just think this is a great combination of deck builder and worker placement, and it's got a lot of variability when you take into account the backside of the board and the newest expansion that gives you 2 more tracks you can use, as well as variable player powers, which really changes up the game itself. And there's another expansion on the way. So Lost Ruins of Arnak, 9.0 for me. I've played Patchwork as well since the last video. This is a tile placement game. It's very puzzly. You play head-to-head with another player. I continue to really like this game. I'm going to continue with my score of an 8.0. I did look into this because there are so many different versions out there of Patchwork. They're themed differently for like different holidays. So you've got, a 4th of July version and a Halloween version. And my problem with the game in general is because there are a set number of tiles, the more you play the game, the more you're using the same tiles every game. You're using all the same tiles every game. So even though the puzzle is really good and the head-to-head element is really good, over time, as you get overly familiar with all of the tiles, it does take away from the puzzle some way. It takes away from the experience of the game. Now, one of my questions had been do the different versions use different tiles? Do they have different button amounts, different time amounts? Are the tiles different shapes? Because these are things that would significantly change the puzzle of the game and might merit someone getting a few different versions of the game. Not simply to have a different look, but so that as they start to get overly familiar with one version of the game, they could swap it out and play another version for a while. What I found is that most versions are simply a retheme, a reskin, but the tile shapes, the sizes, the buttons on them, the time amounts, everything is identical. The Halloween version does make a few changes to a few of the tiles in time amounts, in some button locations, button amounts, but it's kind of minor. So I think if you do want more Patchwork and you already have one version, it might be worth it to get the Halloween version, which will give you a little bit of variability. But in general, there is not much variability, and certainly in most editions, there's no variability. There's just different art. So I think that's something people should know, and I think for me, that limits the game to an 8.0, which is what I gave it last time. It's still a great game. It's a great little puzzly game, but it's a game that once you play it a certain amount, the puzzle is going to start to wear thin somewhat as you become overly familiar with it. Still a really good game. It still merits that 8.0. But I think for me, that's what stops the game from going into like an 8.5 or into the 9s. I played Potion Explosion again, which is a really, really fun tactical game. I've played it on Board Game Arena. I think it's more fun to play in person because you've got this big bank of marbles and you're pulling marbles out and they smack together. And if two of the same color smack together, you get those marbles. And then when you take those marbles out, other marbles on the ends that are the same color smacked together, you get those marbles, and then you're using the marbles to fill out holes in potions, creating potions. Once you have a potion finished, you can trigger the potion ability anytime you want. It's just a great little engine builder with really fun art, fun design sense, and some really great tactical stuff behind it. So I continue to give that one a 7.5. I think on some level it's just missing some depth and some strategy at a certain point, but it is so much fun. So it continues to get a 7.5 from me. Splendor I played a few times, and this one I think I played 3 times. It is an engine builder game where you are collecting little tokens with gems on them to get cards with gems on them, to score points, to hopefully get some other cards that have goal points. It is, I think, something that a lot of people play when they first come into the hobby. It's a great little engine builder. It's got a fun central mechanic going on, but it is kind of repetitive and samey, and that's why for me this one tops out at a 7.0 as a score. Tapestry has a little more going on. I played this a couple more times online. It has some balance issues, I think, still, but it is, again, a game that has a lot of physical components that kind of make the game. Little kind of building miniatures you're going to be putting out on a player mat, and there are different tracks that you go on. It's just inherently so much fun. And it does have some problems, but they aren't always a problem. It just depends on your play. And there's definitely a lot more going on than something like Splendor, which is why for me, I continue to rate Tapestry at a 7.5. And finally, Wingspan is a game that I love. I think that and Lost Ruins of Arnak are two of the games that I keep coming back to on Board Game Arena. Great Western Trail as well, Castles of Burgundy, and I'm going to start throwing some other games in there, probably Isle of Cats, maybe Barrage. But these are all just games with great depth of strategy. And Wingspan occasionally can have some problems if you're trying to get certain cards and you're spending a lot of actions and you're not getting the cards you need coming out. But there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different things to do, and it is such a simple in some ways, yet room for complexity of choice engine builder. And I love birds. I love the card art, and I just kind of love the mechanical systems. So I continue to give Wingspan an 8.5. So in terms of scores for this week, we've got 7 Wonders at a 6.5, 7 Wonders Duel at a 7.0, Caper Europe at an 8.0, the Castles of Burgundy at a 9.0, Descent Legends of the Dark at a 4.5, Kingdom Builder at a 6.5, Lost Ruins of Arnak at a 9.0, Patchwork at an 8.0, Potion Explosion at a 7.5, Splendor at a 7.0, Tapestry at a 7.5, and Wingspan at an 8.5. So that concludes the scores of the week, but before I wrap the video, I'd like to talk a little bit about the situation I was starting to get into with Descent Legends of the Dark, and my thoughts about that game, and my thoughts about what I want to do with this channel, and kind of the board game reviewer side of the industry and what I feel like is missing from it a little bit. I think that there is a lack of critical talk happening with board game reviewers. And I think that's because a lot of them are being used as marketers to sell Kickstarters. So a lot of board game reviewers are, in order to make money, to be able to keep doing it, they have to be marketers for publishers and do videos that are part of their Kickstarter campaigns. Now, my goal with me doing this was always to be able to talk critically about games. So I want to be able to go out there and say, hey, this dungeon crawler has some significant design problems in it. I'm giving it a 4.5. I don't think you should spend your money on it. There are a lot of other good dungeon crawlers out there. I want to be able to say that not as me being a jerk, not because I'm angry at a game or I'm being a jerk, but I think there is room and value for someone to be saying to people, hey, before you spend all your money, you should know that this is what this experience is. And maybe if you want something else, maybe go get one of these other games that's similar, that doesn't have this kind of experience, that isn't have the same kind of design problems to it. But I think what's happening right now with this industry is all of the people who are making board game review videos, teaches to some degree, because there's a lot of people who do teach and reviews, and influencers who are posting things on TikTok and things like that, is they have to be in the pockets of the publishers in order to continue to do what they're doing. So they can't really say anything negative about games. And I'm not the kind of person who wants to say anything negative about games. Like, I'm not here to be negative. I don't want to make a video that tries to get a lot of hits, clicks, views because I'm being negative. And those people are out there too. And they actually do quite well because there is an audience for that. I don't want to do that either, but I think there needs to be a space for people to be talking constructively and critically about games, about what is good about them and what is bad about them, and so that people have something out there to help them make buying decisions beyond just a wall of people loving every game and saying nothing but positive things about every game. A lot of people don't want to spend time making negative videos because it's only going to hurt them. So they basically just make positive videos, and they feel like, well, if there's a game I don't like, I just won't make a video on that game. I'm just going to focus on the positive. And I think there's a lot of good reasoning behind that, at least in terms of an approach to life. But I think if we're looking for people who are reviewers, I grew up with movie reviewers, and they didn't always like every movie. They would let you know when movies didn't work or what was bad about them. I think that is a space right now in the board game hobby that is solidly lacking because no one wants to get out there and say anything negative about games. Let's say critical, because I don't want to be negative. I just want to be honest and critical. And so that is what I am attempting to do. And I think my Descent Legends of the Dark review is definitely going to be speaking to that. Like, people will know that when they watch that video, once we produce that video. But that also means that I cannot be sort of getting paid by publishers to do videos for them. I think it will affect my ability to approach it from this angle, which means that eventually my funding is going to have to come from the other side, the customers, which is why I'll be launching a Patreon in early 2023, and hoping, because right now everything is being self-funded for me. I've been doing this now for a couple years. I don't have health insurance. My wife, who's had several brain surgery operations, doesn't have health insurance. I need to find a way to pay the rent and pay the bills and still do this full time. My website's been up for several years, and I've just been doing that and doing this for free, self-funding, out of savings, but that's not going to last forever. So eventually I need to find a way to make this model work with support from people through Patreon, and then as it gets more popular, hopefully, some advertising revenue through YouTube and the like. So I definitely don't want to put any, weight on anyone. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to support me, but I do want to get a Patreon going so those people who want to support me and have the ability to do so can, so that there can be an alternative outlet out there with people doing honest, critical board game reviews that isn't just people talking positively about every game. And I think something like Descent Legends of the Dark is a game that needs that. It needs that voice out there so that people aren't just blindly going out there and spending their money on it, not knowing what it is they're getting themselves into. Now, I know something like Dice Tower will occasionally do some sort of critical reviews. They did not think much of Jurassic World. I don't think they had problems with this game, Descent Legends of the Dark. But that channel is such a juggernaut at this point that he can afford to do that. He doesn't need publisher money. He has grown this thing. For me, starting out very, very small, I need to find a way to kind of make this work. So in the coming year, more teach and review videos are coming. Very honest teach and review videos, not to be negative for negative's sake, but in order to be critical, to let you know what I really do think about games. Also, live streaming on Twitch to show off games, and so that people can follow along with big campaign games that they maybe can't play on their own and have fun with us. And also just showing Euro games as well. And then I'll be launching a Patreon. So all of that is coming. Thank you very much for spending some time with me and watching this video. I hope you get to play some great games over this holiday season. We've got 2 weeks coming up. Hopefully I'll get to play some great stuff as well and talk about those games when I come back. In the meantime, take care. Whatever holiday you celebrate, have a great holiday season. And I will see you very soon in a couple weeks in my first Kickstarter Weekly for 2023.